This special Purim podcast is dedicated by my dear friend Adam Chuckrow in loving memory and leilui nishmas, his grandmother Hadassah, bat Yosef, who passed away last Purim. So her first Yartzeit is this Purim. May her soul be elevated in heaven. In honor of the special Wheat Here at Torch, the Torch fundraiser happening right now at givetorch.org, every donation is doubled. We're going to talk about the festival of Purim. Of course, you know Purim. It's one of the rabbinic holidays. It celebrates the triumph of our ancestors over their Persian antagonists. On this day, we read the Megillah, which is the official, codified, canonized story of what happened in those fateful days many years ago. We have a mitzvah to give gifts to the poor and send food to your neighbors and friends. And of course, eat a festive banquet. There are some other additional customs, namely in a very unusual way, which we're told seems like very different than the typical style of our festivals. We're told to drink some alcohol. In fact, to drink a lot, so that we don't know the difference between cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordechai. A friend of mine who, we'll call him JJ, a friend of mine, he experienced Purim for the first time, and he said, "You're misspelling Purim. You're spelling it P-U-R-I-M, but it really should be spelled P-O-U-R, to poor, and then a dash, apostrophe M-E-M, Purim," because he saw so many rabbis drinking so much that he said, we have to rename. We have to fix the spelling. Of course, it's a day, traditionally we get dressed up, and it's a day of unbridled joy. And we're remembering the story, the event that happened 2,400 years ago or so, that is told in the Megillah, in the Book of Esther. So this is already after the first temple was destroyed. The Jewish people, they entered the land under the leadership of Joshua. Eventually, David and Solomon, they build the temple. The temple is extant for more than 400 years, but it is destroyed. The nation is sent into exile. In exile, they're under the thumb of their overlords, enemies, the Babylonians, eventually the Persians, and they're trying to go back to the land. They're trying to rebuild the temple, and there's all sorts of obstacles along the way. Meanwhile, there's a grand celebration. This is how the book starts. There's a grand celebration, a 180-day celebration, plus an additional 7 days of celebration. And our sages tell us that this is really the celebration of the prophet Isaiah's prophecy not being fulfilled. The Persians, they understand that they have the Jews underneath their thumb, and they have the vessels of the temple in their coffers, and they were told by the prophet Isaiah that the exile will last only for 70 years, but they miscalculated. They started the clock a bit too early, and they thought 70 years had elapsed, and to celebrate the fact that the temple was not rebuilt, they made a 180-day celebration. It's a banquet for all the people of Persia, and unfortunately, the Jews of Persia, some of them, many of them, they joined the party. And during the end of the party, the end of this very elaborate celebration, the king is drunk, and he summons his very beautiful Queen Vashti to appear, and she doesn't want to appear, and she rebuffs her husband publicly, and that's a great disgrace. We have to get rid of this terrible queen because she's setting a bad precedent. Now all the women will do the same to their husbands. It's going to mess up society. She is deposed. A search committee is appointed to find replacements, and they're taking all the beautiful women and girls from the realm, from the grand empire, the Persian Empire, and they're prepped for 12 months for a single night audience with the king. And then he's running through them, and he's not finding the one to replace his deposed and departed Queen Vashti. And then we read about a woman named Esther, and she is adopted, or maybe she's married to a man named Mordechai. Mordechai is one of the leaders of the Jewish people, and he was part of the first tranche of Jews that were sent into exile. the exile unfolded in stages. One of the stages of the exile is when the Babylonians sent 10,000 of the best and brightest of our people into exile. And he was part of that initial group because he was part of the Sanhedrin. He was part of the grand court, the high court, the supreme court of the land. And he is either married or adopted, different opinions, what exactly his relationship was with Esther. And she is selected. She is a candidate to be the queen to replace Queen Vashti. And he tells her, don't reveal your identity. Don't tell Achashverosh or any of his people, the king or any of his people, that you are in fact a Jewess. And specifically, don't tell him that you are a descendant of royalty. It's something very disgraceful that a relative, whether she's the wife or just the adopted relative of Mordechai, the most prestigious leader of the Jewish people, to be taken as a queen for King Ahasuerus, the Persian, it seems very wrong. But she actually had something going for her. She was a great candidate to be queen, because not only was she very beautiful, one of the most beautiful women of all time, we're told in the Talmud, but she was also descendant of King Saul. She came from royalty. She had royal blood coursing within her. Don't reveal your identity. Don't tell them you're a Jewess, and don't tell them that you come from Saul because you don't want to be selected. Now, as fate would have it, she is selected, and that's part of the whole setup of the story. And then we read in chapter 2 of this book how Mordechai foils an assassination plot on the king. We don't know the significance, the salience of that, but it's going to play a big role towards the end of the story. Now, what you find, if you read the story with a discerning eye, that all the events in the beginning of the story that seem to be unrelated to the major theme of the book, they all surface at the end. And this is one of the themes that we're going to see, that the story of Purim is one where there's all sorts of storylines, subtexts to the story, side points to the story that all come together in this crescendo of salvation and triumph. Now, Ahasuerus is the king of Persia. He rules effectively over the whole world, and he appoints a prime minister who's an Agagite, which means he is from Amalek, a sworn enemy of the Jewish people. Haman is appointed prime minister, and the first thing that he does, the first act, his official act, is that everyone must bow before him. Whenever he walks, everyone must prostrate themselves in front of Haman. Now, Haman also had a figurine of an idol on his necklace. And therefore, when people are bowing down to him, effectively they're bowing down to the idol that he was carrying with him. And everyone was bowing to Haman, because refusal to fulfill this edict is a capital offense. But there was one man, Mordechai, who did not bow and did not prostrate himself. And this angered Haman. This incensed Haman, that this one guy who doesn't bow before him, and he has all the riches and all the power and a massive family, he's everything in the world besides for one thing, that Mordechai, one old Jew, doesn't bow before him, and he says, none of it's worth it. None of it's worth it because this guy doesn't bow before me. But it's beneath him to attack simply Mordechai, to punish simply Mordechai. Instead, he sets his eye out to try to kill the entire nation. And he decides to determine when exactly is the most propitious time to do it. And he rolls dice. He plays the lottery to find out which month is ideal and which day of the month. And he comes up with a plan of genocide to kill the entire Jewish nation on the 13th day of Adar. Now, as an aside, the name of this festival, Purim, means lotteries. Haman had 2 lotteries. He puts 12 dice in his hand. Which month is going to be the right month? He puts out Adar. Which day? The 13th day of Adar. That's the day that he's going to destroy the entire Jewish nation. And then he goes to the king, I need your approval for something. There's this people, and they're terrible, and they're awful, and they're scattered, and they don't approve of you, they don't like you. Let me destroy them. And if you lose tax revenue as a result, I'll cover the loss. And Achashverosh, no righteous person himself, he tells Haman, listen, you do what you want with the Jews. I approve of it, and I don't even need the money. It's fine. You keep the money to yourself. I am equally desirous of destroying the Jewish nation, which is a terrible thing. You have the Jewish people under the control of the Persians, and Haman, the Amalekite, he wants to destroy the nation. And Achashverosh, the would-be protector of the Jews, he also wants to destroy the Jewish nation and is even willing to forfeit all the tax revenue that is lost. And they send irreversible letters throughout the kingdom that grants everyone the right to exterminate and destroy the entirety of the Jewish nation on that day. And the nation is plunged into mourning and dread and fear. Now, of course, Mordechai knows, no one else knows, but Mordechai knows that we have a friend. We have an ally. We have a Jewess in the palace. And he sends her a message. Go do something. Go convince Achashverosh to rescind this decree, or at least to find some way to avoid the fulfillment of this decree. Now, the problem is that she says, well, how can I do it? If I go in and I try to intervene and try to interfere, I'll die. They'll kill me. And there's this whole back and forth between Mordechai and Esther. And Mordechai tells her, you think that if you keep quiet, you'll survive and you'll escape and everyone else will die and you'll endure. No, the Jewish people will always endure. And if you're silent, revach v'hatzala, salvation, deliverance will come for the Jews from a different place. The Almighty promised the Jewish nation will always survive. It will be an eternal nation. It's a promise. We will survive. I don't know how, but it's either through you or somewhere else. And you were sent, most likely, you were sent to this position. You were positioned to play a role. If you don't do it, the salvation will come from someone else, but you will perish. You and your house and the house of your father will perish. And the reason why you were put in that royal position is to take the active role in ensuring the continuity of the nation. She says, sure, but everyone should fast on my behalf. The whole nation has 3 days of fasting. Mordechai actually has 7 days of fasting. She's fasting. Everyone's fasting as a form of prayer to help Esther on her mission. And she goes to Achashverosh and she invites him and Haman to a festive banquet, and she'll tell him what she wants. And they get to the banquet and she says, all I want is another banquet tomorrow. Also with Achashverosh and also with Haman. Now, why exactly is Esther inviting Achashverosh and Haman to a banquet? What's the deeper reason behind this? Why is this part of her plan? So the Talmud actually asks this question. The Talmud goes through every part of the story to explain the deeper subtleties of the story. And the Talmud offers 12 different reasons why Esther invited Haman to her parties with Achashverosh. She's trying to lobby, to persuade Achashverosh to do something to save her nation. And she wants Haman there. Why? So the Talmud says 12 different reasons. She knew, number one, that the wicked, they have their downfall when they get too revelrous at parties. So she's plotting Haman's downfall, and she wants him to be in a party mode. He's more vulnerable then. When she was younger, the second reason the Talmud says, she remembered hearing a verse in Proverbs. If your enemy is hungry, feed him bread. And she says, okay, if that's what King Solomon says in his book of Proverbs, I have my enemy, I'm going to feed him bread. She wanted Haman to be busy so he wouldn't have time to take advantage of his success. She invited Haman so no one would suspect that she's actually a Jewess and she's really being targeted by Haman. She invited Haman so the whole nation realizes what's happening. The clock is ticking to the point of extermination. And everyone's trying to figure out, what can we do? And some people might think, well, we have We have a friend at the palace. So maybe I shouldn't pray. Maybe I shouldn't fast. Maybe I know we got this covered. Esther invites Haman, and the whole people see that. Like, everyone, all the Jews see, like, Haman is being invited. He's being courted. He's being wooed by Esther. We can't rely on Esther. We got to pray. And it goes on reason after reason after reason after reason to explain. She wants Achashverosh to be jealous. She wants to rouse God's compassion. She wants to make sure that when she springs the trap on Haman, he's right there, because Achashverosh was a bit fickle. And if he says, I'll kill Haman, but let's go fetch him, by the time they fetch him, he'll change his plans. She wants him there, so he can say, right then, let's hang him on the gallows, and so on. Reason upon reason. Haman is atop of the world. I was invited to party 1. I'm invited to party 2. And he gets home. On the way home, he sees Mordechai. Everyone's bowing down. Armies of people, legions of people are all prostrating themselves before him. And one man, lo yichra velo yishtachaveh, does not bow, does not prostrate. And he says, I can't wait till the 13th day of Adar. I have to get rid of Mordechai pronto. He gets home, his wife says, we have to build a gallows. Not just any gallows, 100 feet tall. So the whole city can see, the whole capital city of Shushan can see Mordechai, your enemy, hanging and swinging from those gallows. That night, the king is having bad dreams. He's tossing and turning. What's happening? This Esther is inviting Haman to these parties, and we have one party, a second party. Is there some sort of secret plot? Is there something happening over here? Are they trying to undermine me? Are they ganging up against me to depose me? And he's trying to fall asleep. And he's like, well, there's something is afoot here. And he says, let's go back to the Chronicles. Let's read the story. Let's figure out, is there someone who I should have repaid for their loyalty, and I didn't do it? So start reading the Chronicles. And they get to the story of Mordechai. Mordechai saved the king from an assassination plot. And he was not rewarded for his loyalty. So this is the reason why people are not telling me about this current assassination plot. Because they think that I'm not reliable. They think that if you save the king, you get no reward. I have to stop that right now. I want to honor Mordechai. I want to honor Mordechai for his loyalty to the king and save me from that assassination plot. Now, meanwhile, Haman is all concerned about these gallows and doesn't want to wait till the morning. He needs Achashverosh's approval to go hang Mordechai pronto. So he shows up in the middle of the night. And as Achashverosh is tossing and turning, and he learns and he remembers about the story of Mordechai saving the king, Haman shows up. And Achashverosh consults Haman. There's a man that I want to honor. And how should we do it? How should we honor someone who's really been loyal to the king? And of course, Haman thinks he's referring to Haman. He's like, wow, who could the king possibly want to honor more than me? He must be referring to me. So he comes up with the most elaborate plan. We have to deck the guy out, put him on the garments of the king, and put him on the royal chariot of the king, and we should have the highest officer in the land to announce and proclaim, so shall be done to the man whom the king wishes to honor. Parade him throughout the whole streets. He thought, of course, that that's going to come to him. And of course is shocked when Achashverosh says, that's an excellent idea. I want you to go to Mordechai. You're a sworn enemy that you came to me right now to say, let's hang him up on a tree. Give him that honor. And you, because you're the highest officer in the land, you'll parade him throughout the street. And indeed, that's what happens. He spends the whole day between banquet 1 and banquet 2, taking Mordechai, his arch enemy, who's been fasting, and the Talmud even says that he had to climb on top of Haman. He was so weak. He's like, hey, Haman, you have to help me up onto the horse because I'm too weak. I've been fasting for a week. Climb up on top of the horse and parade him throughout the city. And we learn more about what happened. His daughter was witnessing the events, was witnessing the cavalcade. And she sees this incredibly bright, this visage of a great person being paraded by this poor, pathetic person who's carrying him, who's leading the horse and proclaiming, "So shall be done to the man who the king wishes to honor." And she assumes that Haman is on the horse and Mordechai is pulling him. So she starts dumping trash on top of the person leading the horse. And Haman looks up and she sees, oh no, it's her father. So she collapses and falls out the window and dies. That's what we're told. So this is like the worst day of Haman's life, but it's going to get even worse. When he finally finishes the parade throughout the whole city, and he's tired and sweaty and smelly, it's time for the second banquet. And they come and they hustle and bring Haman to the banquet because this is banquet number 2. And there, Achashverosh tells Esther, okay, what do you actually want? And she says, all I want is my life and the life of my people. Your people? Who's your people? Oh, your people are the Jews. And this man, this terrible man, he wants to destroy them. And some series of events happen, and Achashverosh in one stroke says, oh, he wants to hang Mordechai on that tree. Let's hang him on that tree. And indeed, Mordechai replaces Haman, and there's a new decree that on the 13th day of Adar, not that the Jewish people will be destroyed, but they'll defend themselves. They could kill all the people that wanted to kill them. And this terrible genocide was not fulfilled. Instead, the opposite happened, where all those terrible anti-Semites, they themselves were killed, and their plans and schemes were torpedoed. And the Jewish people killed all their enemies. In Shushan, they killed 500 of the worst enemies, including the 10 sons of Haman. And these days were made into holidays. The following day, the 14th day of Adar, is made into a holiday because this is a day of relief when the nation had obtained relief from their enemies. Now, there's some aftermath to the story. At least according to one opinion, Esther bore a son with Achashverosh, who was none other than Darius. And he was the one who signed off on the completion of the temple. The second temple was built under the auspices of the continuation of the line of Achashverosh and Esther. That's the story of the Megillah, which we read every Purim, once by night and once by day. So it's a whole elaborate story, very dramatic. And in fact, it is one of the 24 books of the biblical canon. And one of the most noteworthy aspects of this book is that it's the only book that we have in our canon that the name of God is not mentioned. How many times is the name of God mentioned in the Megillah? Exactly 0 times. And it's maybe the most glaring question in the story in the book. Why is the name of God omitted? Why is apparently the role of God in the story not present for us to learn from it? And this question is a question asked by many. And the answer to this question may open up some portals of understanding into the deeper message of the festival and of the book. Now, over Shabbos, I did some research and I found a book that offers 10 different answers to this question, to the question of why the name of God is omitted from the Megillah. Now, I'm not going to go through all 10 answers, but I'll tell you some of the answers that are proposed. Haman indeed was destroyed. Him and his 10 sons were hung on the gallows that he had intended Mordechai to swing from. But Amalek, the nation of Amalek, endured. The nation of Amalek is still present, is still active. The first time Amalek is mentioned in the Torah as a nation, it's in chapter 17 of Exodus. There's the first war that our nation wages after the Exodus is the war against Amalek. And the war ends where the nation, our nation, weakens Amalek, but doesn't destroy Amalek. And then there's a very short message about the state of existence so long as Amalek is active. And it says that the throne of God, but it doesn't spell out the full name of God. The throne of half of the name of God is going to be active until, or it's going to demonstrate, or it's going to be committed towards this war against Amalek. It's a very cryptic sort of verse. This is in chapter 17 of Exodus. And the commentators always tell us, well, wait a minute, like, why is it talking about the throne of God, but it doesn't spell God's name completely? Why is this contingent on the war against Amalek? And the answer is that the Amalek is the force that is limiting the exposure of God in the world. Amalek is like the foreign God that is detracting from the glory of God in the world. And so long as Amalek reigns, the name of God is not complete. This story is a story of weakening of Amalek, not of destroying of Amalek. And therefore, the name of God, it's not present. It's not visually present in the story. So this shows us one theme of the book. This is a war against Amalek, and it's a continuation of the war that started right after the Exodus, and it continues until this very day, and we're not done. And therefore, the name of God is not going to be present, or at least it's not going to be overtly present. There is another theme that the Talmud tells us about the festival of Purim. The Jewish nation accepted the Torah at Sinai. There were 10 commandments, and it was a very dramatic prophetic experience that happened at Sinai. But if you read the text of the Torah, of the Sinai revelation, it says that the Jewish nation was at the foot of the mountain, but read literally, it's at the, it can be read as underneath the mountain. And the Talmud tells us that the acceptance of Torah at Sinai, it was as if the nation was underneath the mountain. And it's as if God had said to the Jewish people, you must accept the Torah, if not, I will let go of the mountain, so to speak, and crush you and bury you. There was a part of the revelation at Sinai. It was so powerful, it was so undeniable, it was so miraculous that there was no way for a person to say, I don't want the Torah. They were forced into it. They were compelled. It was accepted under duress. It wasn't an even-handed transaction. And therefore, there is the possibility of the nation saying, you know what? We didn't accept the Torah willfully. We were forced into it. This was not a decision that we made on our own. We were compelled to accept the Torah. But in the story of Purim, the nation accepted the Torah out of love, willfully. There were no overt miracles in the Purim story. And the nation was kimu v'kiblu. They upheld and accepted the Torah once more. They renewed their vows that they initially accepted at Sinai. And this time, there were no miracles, there were no overt miracles. So they accepted it out of love. So this Purim story, the Talmud tells us, it's a second Sinai. It's a second reenactment of the Sinai acceptance of Torah. Only this time, there's no miracles, or at least no overt miracles, and they accepted it out of love. They weren't compelled. It was not under duress. And in order to affirm that, the name of God doesn't even appear. Don't think that the presence of God was palpable, was noticeable at the Purim story. No, it wasn't noticeable. And nevertheless, the nation accepted, and thus completing, so to speak, the Sinai acceptance. They accepted it once at Sinai under duress, and now they accepted it willfully out of love. If the name of God was present in the Megillah, Haman and his ilk would be aggrandized. A third answer tells us. Haman would say, look at me. God wants to fight me. Look at Amalek. We're important. We matter. We're an equal, so to speak, God forbid, to Almighty God. We're a counterweight. God needs to kind of show up and fight us. In order to dispel that, God's name is not present. Another answer. There was great joy in the Purim story. La Yehudim, the Jews, they had ora v'simcha, they had light and joy. It's a joyous story, and we celebrate it with joy. The whole day is a day of joy. It's a day that we give gifts to our neighbors, to have a joyous relationship with our neighbors. We give gifts to the poor. They should be joyous as well. We eat. And we even drink a little bit to be joyous as well. We read the story to remember the joyous events. But the joy was marred a little bit by some of the other events of this book. You have a story here that Esther, she's a princess of our people. She's a scion to King Saul. And she has to be taken by Ahasuerus. Could there have been maybe a better way, a less scandalous way to achieve the aims of the story? And yes, the second temple was built as a result of this story, in the aftermath of this story, but the second temple did not endure forever. The second temple was ultimately destroyed. And even when the second temple was active, it did not have all the miracles and all the accoutrements of the first temple. There were people, our sages tell us, who were present in the first temple and when it was rebuilt in the second temple. There's 70 years between them, but there were some really old people who remembered the first temple and they were there at the inauguration of the second temple. And they were crying because they remembered the grandeur and the prestige and the stature of the first temple. And the second temple paled by comparison. So yes, it's a joyous story, but there's a little bit of an asterisk to the joy. And we don't quite have the full unbridled joy that hopefully we will have when the third temple is built with great pomp and ceremony. And indeed, the glory of the first temple will be restored and it will be permanent and eternal. Then we could have full joy. And the name of God is not going to be applied on this story because it's not really a full story. And finally, again, I'm only telling you some of the answers. There's many, many more answers. The other answer I saw, which was very interesting, this I did not know. The Megillah itself, the Book of Esther itself, says that this was included in the chronicles of Persia and Media, the Persian Empire. This story was present in the Persian Empire. They chronicled it in the official history books of Persia. And what were they working off? They were working off the story that Mordechai and Esther wrote, the Book of Esther. The Book of Esther itself was translated to Persian. What would be if the Book of Esther had lots of instances where the name of God was present, and Mordechai and Esther had highlighted every role that God was playing behind the scenes to make sure that Esther was chosen and that Vashti was deposed and Haman was appointed and all these decisions all happened. It all seems to be random, all seems to be coincidental, but really it's God manipulating it all. If the name of God was overt, what would happen in the Persian translation? They would take their deity, and every time it says the name of God, they would just supplant it with their deity. And that would be, of course, a great disgrace. And Mordechai and Esther knew that. They knew this was going to be included in the Chronicles, so they just made a decision to not include the name of God, at least not overtly, in the official retelling of the events. That said, the name of this book is called the Book of Esther, but really it's called the Scroll of Esther, Megillah, which means a scroll. Megillat Esther, the Scroll of Esther. Now in Hebrew, the word Megillah, or Megillah, also means to reveal what is hidden. And the word Esther means hidden. So Megillah Esther can be read as the Scroll of Esther, the Book of Esther, the story of Esther, but it can also be read as the revealing of the hidden. And while it is true that the name of God does not appear even once throughout the whole book, the goal of the reading of the book is to reveal the hidden, to show where God actually was present in this story. Every part of the many moving parts of the story could have happened on their own, could have happened absent a miracle. There's no overt miracles, no splitting of the sea, there's no manna that the nations eat, no 10 miraculous plagues. Nothing of that nature is happening over here. But nevertheless, if you dig beneath the surface and you try to reveal what is hidden, you find that actually the Almighty is manipulating the whole story. And when you zoom out and you see the whole story in its context, the story actually happened over the course of 9 years. It's presented as one narrative, but historically it took 9 years from beginning to end. The whole story is really about trying to find the hidden role that God played, the guiding hand of God that was manipulating every event, every beat of this story. And the commentaries actually discover that there are all sorts of hidden references to the name of God. For example, when Esther invites Haman and Achashverosh to the banquet, she makes the decision to use this banquet as a means to try to lobby Achashverosh on the nation's behalf. The verse says, Yavo Hamelech, let the king come. Yavo starts with the Yud. Hamelech starts with the Hey, Yud Hey. Haman and Haman. So Yud Hey, if you look at the first letter of these words, Yavo is a Yud. Hamelech, the king. Hey. Haman, that's a Vav. And then the final word is Hayom, today. Those 4 words, the first letter of each of those four-letter words is a Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey. It's the name of God. And in fact, people have looked, first letters, last letters. There's many, many, many references of the name of God in the actual text of the book, but it's hidden. And what's amazing is that, we spoke about this earlier, that the reason why Esther invited Haman to her party, well, there's 12 different reasons. Why does she invite Haman to the party? Talmud says 12 different reasons. Now, one of the sages met Elijah the prophet, and they started discussing the reasons why Esther invited Haman to her party. And the sage asked Elijah the prophet, you're a prophet, tell us which one of these 12 reasons is correct. And Elijah the prophet says, well, actually, they're all correct. She had all 12 reasons in mind. So we have Esther scheming and planning what to do about this major problem. The nation is slated for complete and utter destruction. And I'm going to make a bold move, a courageous move to endanger myself to save them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite Haman and Pharaoh. That's what I'm going to do. I'm sorry, Haman and Achashverosh. Pharaoh is a different guy, a different king with similar predilections and desires. I'm going to invite Haman and Achashverosh to a party today. And why? 12 different reasons. And specifically there, the authors of the Megillah made sure that you spelled the name of God. Notwithstanding the fact that Esther had 12 different reasons for her behavior, ultimately, you zoom out and you see, actually, this is all the will of God. The festival is called Purim. Why? Because of a lottery. It's a lottery. It's random. But the truth of the reason why this name is the appropriate name is because, yes, Haman thought it's all random. There's no hand of God at all. Our revelation of the hidden, the Megillas Esther, is to remind us that even the events that are deliberately random, it's spinning dice, it's pulling stuff out of a lottery, even that, God is in ultimate control. There is a custom to get dressed up. Why? To wear a mask. Why? To understand that there's something behind the veneer, behind the facade. There's always something hidden that needs to be revealed. And this really is a story of our nation. We look back at 4,000 years of Jewish history. How long ago did Abraham live? 3,800 years ago or so? It's a long story since Abraham made the decision to cross over the river and to be the one who's willing to stand up for God in the world. And to be the father of the great nation and father of many nations that are going to bring the world to perfection. And you look back at a retrospective of all of this history, and there's a lot of suffering along the way, and a lot of close brushes with destruction. And all sorts of events that at the time, it's hard for us to see where was God. And there's a lot of suffering, a litany of suffering throughout our story. One of the elements of Messiah is the full fulfillment of this revelation of the hidden. The verse tells us, "Az yimale schot pinu," then our mouth will be full of laughter. We may be suffering a lot over the course of our 4,000 years of history, but there will be a point in time where we'll be able to see the entirety of God's plan. And the only reaction we'll have is laughter. We'll see all the moving parts. It's like a massive, massive Purim story. And all these parts of the story, we don't see until the very end how they're all connected. It's a 1,000-piece puzzle, but no, there's 1,000,000 pieces. And each event is one piece, and we have no idea how it fits into the big picture, literally. And Messiah comes, and suddenly we could zoom out and see the entire picture. And every single little piece on its own doesn't really tell a story. But together, it's a great tapestry. In this week's Parsha, it's Parsha's Ki Sisa. And it's a very dramatic Parsha. We have the golden calf and the aftermath. And there's a very, esoteric exchange between Moshe and God. Moshe tells God, show me your honor, show me, reveal yourself to me, so to speak. And we don't know exactly what Moshe wants to do. What does he want to see? What does he want to learn? But there's a line where God says, I will show you my back, but my face you will not see. And what that means, it's a very difficult subject to understand. Theologically, it's a bit challenging. What does that mean? God doesn't have a visual appearance. One of the explanations is that the hand of God is only visual in retrospect. The role of God at the time, we didn't see God for 9 years. You write the book, you reveal the hidden. And you look backwards, you have a retrospect, and you see the hand of God. That's the lesson of the Book of Esther. There's a lot of difficult things that happened, a lot of tragedy and suffering that happened. But when it's done, you reveal the hidden, you realize that it's really the Almighty taking care of us and working towards our benefit. And ensuring that the temple's being rebuilt. And ensuring that the nation will have a great continuity. But at the time, it was hidden. His role was hidden, was obscured, was obfuscated. And our sages tell us that the only way to really understand, to be able to celebrate, before you see the whole picture, before you see the 1,000,000-piece puzzle, you have to get a bit tipsy. You gotta be a little drunk. You have to suspend your understanding. You have to take your intellect and put it aside. In the dog days of Haman, it's very hard to celebrate. When you think you know what's happening, you think that you have a sense in the direction of where things are going. And you evaluate things, and this is bad, and this is bad, and maybe this is good, but this is bad, and this is bad. Purim teaches us you have to take your own intellect, you have to take your own understanding, your own assessment, your own evaluation, your own analysis, and toss it out the window. And you have to develop this suspension of belief in your own capacity to judge, in your own capacity to assess and evaluate. And say, God, you have a plan. I know you have a plan. There will come a time that we'll be able to look backwards and see the plan. But right now, I can't see it. And I am recognizing that, and I'm just taking my capacity to evaluate things rationally and tossing it out the window. The work of Purim is to reverse engineer the story of Purim and find all the hidden times where God did things for our benefit and we did not know about it at the time. We read the story of Purim and we piece together the miracles. We get a little chance to see behind the curtains. It's a mini micro Messiah where we get to look back and see in this little story to see all the hidden parts, hidden roles that God played at the time. And we see the Almighty orchestrating and manipulating and coordinating the events. Each event on its own, it's a piece of the puzzle. It's not surprising. It's not noteworthy. It's not nature defying. It's not a miracle. Each can be excused away as a coincidence. But the story is positioned in a way, in the Megillah, to reveal the hidden hand of God. Yes, the name of God is not featured overtly in the Book of Esther, but it is there. It's there. It's hidden. God is behind the scenes. You need to squint a bit in order to see him. Our objective on Purim is to learn to train ourselves to see the Almighty's hidden hand, orchestrating everything in our personal lives, orchestrating everything in our national lives, orchestrating everything in all of human history. And to realize the Almighty is guiding us. He's preparing us. God prepares the footsteps of man. He's positioning us to achieve our destiny and our mission in life. And all those obstacles that bother us, that stymie us, that stifle us, they're actually very strategically positioned to ensure that we achieve our destiny. Those obstacles are not obstacles. They're divine nudges, positioned perfectly to help us achieve greatness. May we all be so fortunate as to take the lesson of Purim to heart and to see the hidden themes, to reveal them, to do the Megillas Esther, and to look back at the story of Purim and to see the hand of God, the name of God. It's there, but it's hidden. To piece together that puzzle of that story and to take comfort in the fact that when we live in a chaotic and hard to understand world and hard to understand life, and we see hard to understand events, hard to understand consequences of events, hard to understand developments, and we try to understand what's happening. Where's God? Did God forget us? No. He's there. His role is hidden. We will one day, please God, witness the completion of this puzzle. But now we have to accept that. We see an example of that, and we have to train ourselves. And it's sometimes hard to do. You might need a drink or two to get there. To train ourselves, the Almighty is holding our hand, guiding us every step of the way. Let's have a happy Purim. Let's have a joyous Purim. Joy with ourselves, joy with our family, joy with our community. Joy, by the way, even with our enemies. Because ultimately, they too are just tools of the Almighty. And with this joy, we can re-accept the Torah with a full heart. It's not being forced upon us. You understand that ultimately it's all for our benefit. When Messiah comes, actually the role of Purim will be augmented. Why? Because this is the prototype of what we're going to learn, of what we're going to see, of how we're going to be educated, of how we're going to be transformed. May we witness the full redemption, where we can have full joy, where the name of God could be revealed in all of its glory, where Amalek will be destroyed and the throne of God will be complete. May it happen speedily in our days. Have a happy Purim. Have a joyous and uplifting Purim. The Torch fundraiser is happening still right now. GiveTorch.org. Thank you all for your friendship and your kindness and your wonderful support. And my email address is, should you choose to email me to let me know about what's going on, rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. I look forward to your questions, your comments, and your feedback.